Halloween is a spooky yet fun holiday that is enjoyed by children and adults alike. That doesn't change the fact that it's also a dangerous night just like any other. These 5 people that mysteriously vanished on or around Halloween night prove that you don't only have to worry about ghosts and goblins, but terrifying real-world threats as well. Number 5. 34-year-old Christina Bastian was last seen leaving a friend's house on Halloween night in 2015. Christina's troubles began a few months before she vanished, though. She was working as a teacher full-time, but found that her income wasn't enough to keep her from drowning in debt. With this huge pressure on her shoulders, something urged her to stop taking her medication, which had been prescribed to subdue her bipolar disorder symptoms. Christina's family said that the first month or so after she stopped her meds, she was completely fine. Luckily, she didn't have any major side effects or withdrawals from stopping cold turkey. Things didn't stay bright forever, though. She started to unravel from stress and was experiencing severe mood swings and signs of paranoia. A few weeks before Halloween, her paranoia worsened after her apartment was allegedly broken into, leaving her robbed of many valuables and sentimental items. She shared her worries and fears with coworkers, who later explained it was obvious to tell she was losing control of her mental state. Things weren't bad enough for her to be committed, though, and she lived in fear instead. None of this meant that she wasn't a functioning person, though. She managed to control her symptoms enough to continue showing up to work and doing things she loved, like spending time with family and attending her local church. She was described as kind and outgoing, which made her work in the church even more admirable. On Halloween, Christina spent her day attending a church festival for the harvest season and holiday. Her peers described that she worked hard that day to keep things moving, and that although it wasn't obvious, they suspected she was having trouble keeping her nerves and emotions in check, simply because of the event. Still, Christina didn't show any major signs of her mental health decline and finished up at the festival. She drove a few miles away to a friend's house after church, where the pair hung out for several hours. After 1:45 a.m. that night, as the Halloween holiday was in full swing around the city, Christina left her friend's apartment, taking only her small dog. She left all of her other belongings behind. After this, Christina was never seen again. Some of her clothing was found along an interstate highway a short drive from her friend's house. Later the same day, her truck was found parked in an isolated area just off of a busy road. After that, a woman came forward to share that she had found Christina's dog, Coco, roaming the streets just off the highway in a small residential area. After a few weeks, more of her clothing items were found thrown along another interstate. No further evidence was ever gathered, and she sadly still remains missing. The common theories are that she either vanished of her own free will after a lack of medication sent her into a negative mental state, or she was the victim of someone's Halloween night hunting. Number 4. George Greenshields was only 30 years old when he vanished mysteriously. On October 30th, 1989, George talked to his family on the phone and was casually seen by friends throughout the day. Later, these witnesses described that nothing was wrong with George and he seemed to be in a good mood. On the following day, which was Halloween, George dressed up as the Joker and attended Guavaween, a special festival in Tampa, Florida. He was seen by friends and strangers he interacted with throughout the duration of the fun and spooky event. A few years prior, George got caught up in some criminal activity. During a routine traffic stop, an officer found Valium in his car, an anxiety medication that, without a prescription, calls for jail time. Once his trial was settled, he was sentenced to 3 years of probation in 1987, meaning that by the time he went missing, he only had a short amount of time left before he was truly free from the grip of the law. Obviously, he didn't finish up his sentence and stopped showing up for his meetings after that Halloween. In early 1990, a court order was filed and a warrant for George's arrest was issued. When officers tried to track him down, they contacted his family members and peers. These witnesses reported that they hadn't heard from him in several months and assumed he was isolating himself. A search was conducted at his apartment where police found the Joker costume from Halloween, and the rest of his belongings were left behind. The state of the apartment suggested that he had just stopped in at home after the festival for a quick minute, but of course, his wallet and keys being left behind raised suspicion that he did not leave of his own free will. George's probation officer was questioned, and he explained that the missing man didn't seem like the kind of person that would just evade the law and go on the run, especially when he was so close to completing his punishment. George was never found, and many questions relating to his disappearance are still unanswered today. Number 3. On October 31st, 2014, Shawn Ritchie, a 20-year-old student from Scotland, spent the day at home with his mother. Unbeknownst to either of them, this was the last time they would ever see each other. The day turned to evening, and Shawn informed his mom that he had plans with a few friends. In the spirit of Halloween, they decided to make a short trip to a farmland in a town a few miles away. Something about the location they planned to visit was creepy and fit the thrill of Halloween night fun. Shawn's friends picked him up in a white van, and the group embarked on their trip. They arrived successfully at the farm, although it's unclear what they did once they got there. It was later reported that at some point in the night, Shawn lost his way and separated from the group. After this, an emergency call was made to local authorities, reporting that Shawn could not be found and they were worried about his well-being. Oddly enough, the friends made a second emergency call to cancel the first one. They explained that the issue had been solved, but never clearly stated that Shawn had actually been found. That night, Shawn didn't return home. It's believed that his friends simply left without him after a few hours. When Shawn didn't return home that night after his Halloween shenanigans, his mother began to worry. That sense of fear and uncertainty only worsened the next day, when there was still no sign of Shawn, not even a phone call. On the following Sunday, Shawn's family had enough of the waiting game and contacted local police to report him missing. A search was conducted in the city and in the area of the farmland where he was last seen. In the first few days, nothing of substance could be found. Eventually, a witness from the area came forward to report that while passing through, they noticed a young man that resembled Shawn running through the fields as though he was being chased. They apparently assumed it was a Halloween chase or game of some kind and continued on their way. This added another layer of mystery to the case, but it didn't bring detectives any closer to finding the missing man. On November 6th, police were searching the woodland areas surrounding the farmland and found clothing items spread across an isolated area. The items included an entire outfit, even shoes and a belt were found in the pile. Tests were run that confirmed the clothing belonged to Shawn, but that was the last break in the case. His family worries that he either got lost in the woods and passed away from exposure to the elements, or that he was the target of a sick Halloween game planned by his friends. This theory is strengthened by the fact that Shawn's friends didn't work closely with police and only provided vague answers in relation to what the group was doing that night and what happened after they lost Shawn. The search for him is still ongoing and is considered one of the biggest missing person efforts in Scotland history. Number 2. The most popular thing for people to do on Halloween is throw a party, obviously. The entire month of October can be used for Halloween events, and there's no doubt that any night of the month can be just as creepy as Halloween Day itself. Sadly, sometimes parties or even just heavy drinking can lead to some tragic events or scary encounters. That's what happened to 40-year-old Veronica Safranski from Warren, Minnesota. On October 26, 1996, Veronica attended a party at a local bar. The scene was packed with people in all kinds of costumes. Veronica met up with a good friend while at the bar, dressed in her now infamous Pocahontas costume. The girls had a blast together at the party, according to her friends and later reports. They shared drinks and laughed for a fair chunk of the evening, and it seemed as though the night was going very well. Veronica had a bit too much to drink though and kept wandering away from her friend. Around 12:30 midnight, Veronica once again slipped away, but this time, her friend was unable to find her inside of the bar. For a short period, her friend just walked around the bar and outside patio in search of her tipsy friend. After no luck in finding her, the friend stepped it up and began questioning people at the bar about Veronica's whereabouts or if they had seen her. One group of partiers shared that they'd spotted Veronica leaving the bar with the man she'd only met a moment ago. The man, later identified as Kevin Skirvin, convinced Veronica to leave with him, and witnesses saw her get into his car before driving away quickly. Veronica's friend decided that there was no luck in finding her friend and hoped that she would make it home safe. No one heard from Veronica for the rest of the night. She failed to return home, and when she was still gone without a trace the following day, her family and close friends banded together to report her missing and join the hunt to find her. After searching her place of work, the busy city near the bar, and even the bar itself, investigators knew what they had to do and contacted the mysterious stranger, Kevin. After running his name, they found that he had a history of assault charges, which raised a red flag. During an interrogation, Kevin shared that he brought Veronica home with him, but she left later that night and he didn't have a clue where she went or where she was. The search didn't stop, but it did start to die down. That is, until Veronica's signature Pocahontas costume was found thrown to the side of the road along a busy city street. Tests were immediately run that confirmed the costume was hers. A few weeks later, the belt of the costume was also found abandoned, this time along a residential street in Kevin's neighborhood. Once again, Kevin became the star suspect in detectives' minds, but they were unable to bring charges against him without better evidence. Veronica or her remains have still not been found. Number 1. This case is special because, as far as most investigators and online sleuths are concerned, the truth is obvious. Law requires evidence, though, something that detectives were unable to collect against the clear suspect. Nancy Penner was 29 years old when she went missing on Halloween in 1983. She was living in California with her long-term boyfriend, Jeff Jeffries, and their 2 shared children, Yana and Omar. Yana was Jeff's son, and Omar was from a previous relationship of Nancy's. The family unit seemed happy and average as far as their friends and loved ones were concerned. However, you can never fully understand what goes on behind closed doors in situations like these, and if what detectives expect to be true really is, then it's safe to say there was some turmoil and possible abuse going on between these 2 lovers. On the day that Nancy vanished, her friends had called her and invited her to a Halloween party going down that night. She agreed to go and sounded excited during the phone call. A few hours passed and Nancy's friends never heard from her. She failed to arrive and their countless calls went unanswered. The last person to see Nancy on Halloween was her boyfriend. It goes without saying that Nancy didn't just run off for a Halloween getaway and decided to never return, as too much time passed after that night. Things carried on and the victim's family tried contacting her several times over the course of at least a month. Her brother and parents called to invite her to Thanksgiving dinner and a Christmas celebration, but they couldn't get in contact with anyone, not even Jeff, who was living a normal life at home, meaning he was ignoring their calls on purpose. On December 19, 1983, Nancy's brother had enough of the games and finally reported his sister missing. When Jeff caught wind of that news, he quickly concocted a plan and reported to her brother as well as the police that he had come home from work one day to find that Nancy was gone and there was evidence of injury smeared across the house in a bright red tint. The story raised even more questions among investigators, especially because it was suspicious that Jeff cleaned the crime scene instead of calling 911, which any other husband or boyfriend would do in this situation. He allowed over a month to pass without saying a word to anyone about his supposedly missing wife. There was never enough evidence against Jeff, but it was commonly accepted that despite a lack of evidence, he was likely the cause of his wife's disappearance. A few days after Nancy was reported missing, on December 22nd, Jeff took the kids to Hawaii for an oddly short vacation away from the investigation. It seemed that he was trying to run from the law, even though he wasn't considered a suspect just yet. When he returned, he basically abandoned his children. He drove Omar to California, where he dropped him off with distant relatives. As far as Yana, he was sent to live with his stepsister. In 1986, 3 years after Nancy's absence, Jeff took his own life. Many years later, Omar came forward to report that he remembered his father firing a weapon at Nancy in the bathroom. However, that wasn't enough for the case to progress, in addition to the suspect having already passed away. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.